Call this meeting of the Pittsburg City Commission to order. If you would, please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. We'll start things off tonight with public input. If you have anything to share with the commission, we'd ask that you come up now. Unless, I will say this, if you have comments regarding the Rural Housing Incentive District, that you save those for the hearing that we'll be opening here after the consent agenda. You'll have an opportunity to speak on that. So for everybody else that does not want to talk about that, if you have something to share with us, now would be a great time to come forward and share your name and address.
William Strength, 1515 Hampton, and I've got more for later, but the thing I'd like to ask the City Commission about is the website and transparency, especially with the P&Z board. There was a meeting last night. Nobody would have known it because there was no agenda posted. We ended up being there, and I don't think the commissioners know it because they had to start it late to wait till they could get the fourth person there so they could have a quorum. The minutes for the June 25th meeting of P&Z didn't get posted till this morning. The agenda for that meeting didn't get posted till after 10 o'clock the morning of the meeting. If you go and spend any time looking at the web pages, especially P&Z, the files are all messed up. Their names, the dates are wrong on the outside of the file name and the inside. A lot of them don't add up. They're not the same. It's just, there is no transparency. Everything's hid. And, you know, this way everything seems to be going right now. And I'll have some other stuff a little bit later. But where's the transparency? The website is a disaster. The files. Thank you.
Is there anyone else to share something with public input? If not, we will close public input, and we have a proclamation for this evening for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Art Brooke? Yes, come on forward, sorry. Just lacking my duties here. Whereas domestic violence is a widespread, preventable public health problem impacting all demographics of Kansas communities, and residents of Pittsburgh, and whereas relationships are often counted as life's greatest treasures, and tragically, many are tarnished by one person's entitlement to power and control over the other, resulting in violence and fear, and whereas domestic violence abusers violate an individual's privacy, dignity, security, and humanity, with their intentional, systematic use of financial, psychological, sexual, physical, and coercive control and abuse. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, reports that about 1 in 3 American women and 1 in 3 American men experience contact sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. Yet only 1 in 4 American women and 1 in 10 American men experience domestic violence and also reported some form of related impact from inflictions. And whereas the CDC statistic of 1 in 3 people who experience this violence translates to a third, or 1 in 3 Kansans, amounting to over 1 million people and 35% of the Kansas population. And whereas the U.S. Department of Justice reports domestic violence homicides comprise 14% of all homicides in the United States, and that women are more than twice as likely as men to be killed by an intimate partner. And the Kansas Bureau of Investigation reports that domestic violence homicides were 12.8% of all homicides in Kansas in 2016. And whereas in In Kansas during 2016, one domestic violence arrest was made by law enforcement every 46 minutes. One domestic violence incident occurred every 23 minutes, and one domestic violence murder occurred every 19 days. And whereas members of the City of Pittsburgh governing body recognize this violence is inconsistent with Pittsburgh values and cannot be tolerated. Now, therefore, I, Jeremy Johnson, Mayor of the City of Pittsburgh, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2018 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and call this observance to the attention of all here in Pittsburgh. Anything you wanted to share?
We just want to thank the City of Pittsburgh for their support of our cause. October is really important to us at Safe House. It's where we get to spread our knowledge about domestic violence and the impact it makes on the victims in our communities. So we just want to thank you for the acknowledgement, and it's really incredibly special to not only us as staff and our board of directors, but also the victims that we serve and their survivors of violence. So thank you.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed?
I would like to move item C.
Item C? Are there any others? If not, I will look for a motion to approve minus...
Motion to approve the consent agenda without item C.
It has been moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Chenoweth? Aye. Johnson?
Aye.
McNay?
Aye.
Munsell?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item C reads, approval of the application submitted by Michelle Fowler for a 2018 cereal malt beverage license for the Main Street Axe Company, LLC, located at 216 South Broadway, and authorization for the city clerk to issue the license. Go ahead.
Yeah, just being new to the commission, I thought it was important to understand why the cereal malt liquor license and the exemption for allowing those under 21 in the establishment. I don't think people understand that there's some exemptions to that, so I thought it would be important just to clarify that.
Henry, if you're referring to section B and C, which pertains to the axe throwing company or axe throwing establishment, there's two separate discussions here. One is for the exemption, and the other is what we're talking exemption for under 21. What specifically are you type of information are you needing?
So I was, we're looking at that establishment like we do the bowling alley.
Okay.
So I just had some questions in the community about, you know, axes and that, and so it was really clear to me in the packet that why the exemption is made, but I just think it's important to bring that up.
Sure.
In
This
the
is
open meeting.
This is a new business endeavor that we haven't seen in Pittsburgh. It's a trend that we've seen, it's my understanding, in Kansas City and many of the metro areas throughout the country. We've had a number of meetings with Michelle, who is the owner of the business, with city staff, along with visiting on site at their business establishment. Michelle is here in case you have any specific questions for her. But the meetings that we've had with her, she's been very receptive to any of the recommendations or any of the feedback that we've given to her. Initially, personally, I didn't know what exactly this was, and I'm sure many of us in this room are not very familiar with what this business is. It's primarily, is my understanding, it's going to be axe throwing. It's not necessarily primarily a bar. It's more of a club where they do axe throwing. It's kind of a sport. And then they will be serving 3.2 alcohol is what the request is. But if you have specific questions about more pertaining to the day-to-day, I'm sure Michelle would be more than willing to answer any questions. But the police department has visited with them. City staff has visited with Michelle as well. We don't have any reservations at this point. She's been receptive to any of the questions or concerns that we have. And we think that certain safety precautions have been put in place, and we just don't have any reservations at this point.
I have a question. How do we pull one business out of the bag to make this exception? We provide an exception for bowling alleys for this club. Do we have a policy on what kind of establishments we grant this exception? And I'm not taking them to task. It's just a curious something.
I think that's a great question.
Thank you.
If we'd have had a policy, this wouldn't have been in it, because I don't think anybody had ever heard of Axe Throwing Club 4 months ago. So no, we don't have a policy. It's within every business's right. I guess if a retail business wanted to approach the commission and ask for an exemption so people could shop and have a beer, you'd need to consider it. This was a specific request. Didn't fall into anything else. We studied it. There's a pretty good history in the state with other clubs doing this. Its focus is a club like a bowling alley. Its focus is bowling. So the more we looked into it, the less we saw any reason to oppose it. But I mean, there's no good answer to your great question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. If there's no other questions, I move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, public hearing. The City of Pittsburgh advertised for a public hearing to be held on Tuesday, September 25th, 2018 at 5:30 p.m. to receive public comment on the establishment of a Rural Housing Incentive District, or RHID, and the adoption of a plan for the development of housing and public facilities in such a proposed district. So we'll go ahead and open the hearing. And Quentin, did you have something that you wanted to say beforehand, or?
I did not. Other than
you came up like you had a purpose. So.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we passed the resolution for this at the August 28th meeting to establish this public hearing for comment today. So after that, I can come back up and answer questions.
Thank you.
Okay. So the way that we'll do this is, if you have comments regarding the Rural Housing Incentive District, we'll ask that you come forward and do as Bill did, share your name and address. And again, because we have a full house this evening, I would ask that people limit their comments to roughly 3 minutes and try to not repeat what somebody before you has said, so we hear what everybody has to say as much as possible. So with that said, we'll open the hearing and get started.
Okay, Jan Eli, 1521 Hampton Road. My first comment is, the Silverback Landing subdivision does not meet the specifications of Article 2-105 of the subdivision regulations. And I think you should all have knowledge of the Article 2-105. If you don't, I have some material here. The Silverback Landing subdivision is more than 4 lots. Therefore, this should be declared invalid and the process starts over. How can, and I'm asking the City Commission, consider the adoption of the RHID with the proposed Silverback Landing Phase 1 when filed incorrectly? Do you have any comments?
No. How can we, Darren?
Are we going to take these one at a time, or are we just going to respond at the end?
We have documentation. We can go through this. We have like the notice of hearing, April 25th, posted in the Morning Sun. And if someone wants to hand these out so the commissioners have that, that's fine. Planning and Zoning Commission agenda, May 21st, 2018. Planning and Zoning Commission agenda, June 25th, 2018. These all have mention of the 2-105. Bill, I'll just give this to you. Then we have an inter-office memorandum to Darren Hall from Dexter Neisler on June 27th. Bill, here's another one. Excuse me. interoffice memorandum to Darren Hall from Dexter Neisler on June 27, 2018 regarding the 7/10/18 agenda item. Mr. Neisler was giving information about the actions taken at the 6/25/18 P&Z Commission. The phrase, under the provision Article 2-105 was deleted. And from that date on, poof, we never heard of Article 2-105. Just wanted some answers.
I think our plan is to just hear from everyone and then address the questions.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I think we're planning to do.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wanted to share for public, the hearing?
Yes, hello, I'm Andrea Linder. I live at 1534 Hampton Road. I have concerns regarding Article 2-101. There's a few discrepancies throughout some of this process that we have reviewed, and I just want to make you aware of it and kind of question that. This Article 2-101 states that it establishes the uniform procedures and platting requirements for subdivisions subject to the ordinance. It states that the final plat shall be filed or recorded with the County Register of Deeds as required by law, unless and until it has been acted upon by the Planning Commission and approved by the governing body as required herein. The first date I want to address is July 10th. The City Commission, on the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Board, approved both the preliminary and the final plat of the Silverback Landing addition. To my knowledge, they have to go through a process where they're both not approved at the same time at the same meeting. On August 14th, the agenda includes information that the Planning Commission approved the final plat on June 27th, but this date was actually on June 25th. This was a memorandum from Quentin Holmes to Darren Hall stating about the zoning appeals, and it was, I want to make sure I get this right. Upon approval of the board, the plat was submitted to the Pittsburg City Commission. But on this date of June 27th, that date is not accurate. It was actually on June 25th. And I know for some, 2 days different is trivial, but anyone here that has worked with contracts or legal documents of any kind knows that dates are important. They can be extremely important, in fact, and so we wanted to point that out. The facts are that the Planning Commission approved both the preliminary and the final plat at the same time. However, in the Resolution 1206, it shows the preliminary plat only. And this plat is different. It's a different plat than what was proposed at earlier meetings. And so my question to you is, how and when did the plats change from earlier documents, and was the proper procedures followed for this whole process? I welcome any comments, or if you want to wait till later, that's fine.
I think so. We're taking notes of all of the questions,
Okay.
and we'll address them then.
Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Brooks, 1533 Hampton Road. I'm talking to you tonight about Article 2-103, but before I do that, I have a question. There was a Morning Sun article on February 27th, 2015 that had to do with Pittsburg land swap with Pitt State. Roughly, there was 72.73 acres that the city of Pittsburgh swapped with Pitt State for 30. And I just had some questions about the numbers. Of the 72.73 acres, there was a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer report that stated that Silverback Landing was a 40-acre development. So if you took 72.73 and subtracted the 40 acres, that leaves you with 32.73 acres. And of that 32, the floodplain and the forest area accounts for roughly 13 acres. So that leaves you 19.73 acres. So I was wondering, according to the Morning Sun article that day, piece of property that you swapped for was $280,000. So I'm just curious about what are you doing, where's the 19 acres that's unaccounted for? I wondered if you guys would be able to tell us. November 25th, 2015, let's see here. Sorry, I just want to get right here. Not November 25th, October 14th of 2015 is when the quit claim deed was recorded at the county. And there is parts in here that are not listed. And I was just wondering where the 19 acres is, if you could tell us. And then going back to Article 2-103, it's the application and preliminary plat contents. I'd like to know where the certification of the preliminary plat was. The final plat was certified and stamped, but not the preliminary one. In Article 2-103, number 3, the application is upon receipt of the preliminary plat and supporting data required in this section, the zoning administrator shall certify the application as complete and affix the date of the application acceptance on the plat or the application form. They shall then place the preliminary plat on the agenda for consideration at the first available meeting of the Planning Commission. And then going to the same Article 2-103, number 5, the Planning Commission shall review the preliminary plat for the compliance and the provisions of the ordinance. And after reviewing the preliminary plat based on the objectives and the requirements of the ordinance, comments from concerned citizens and the report of the zoning administrator, the Planning Commission shall take action on the acceptance, modification, or rejection of the preliminary plat. Approval of the preliminary plat by the Planning Commission shall permit the applicant to proceed with the filing plat as described in Section 2-104. The zoning administrator shall forward a statement of the action taken by the Planning Commission to the governing body, and the governing body, at its request, may require that it must approve the preliminary plat before the applicant can submit a final plat. Now, I do know for a fact that the preliminary plat checklist was never checked on any of your documents. And I wondered also, because the preliminary plat was never stamped, how is that possible, that it could be passed on and approved if those aren't taken care of? Didn't know if any of you could have any.
We're answering all the questions at once.
All right, that's all I have then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just to carry on just a little bit, finished 103, I'll hit 104 real quick because I've got some more important stuff to hit in a second. But 104 is the final plat. The final plat that you approved on July 10th had a side yard of 7 feet. The plat that was filed in the county courthouse, which we just got a copy of, it went down to 5 feet. Which meeting of the P&Z that we missed did that get approved to go from 7 feet to 5 feet? I mean, we must have missed one, but I'm not sure when we did. So, and it's supposed to have all public items listed on the final plat. We've been told so many things by the developer, all these different meetings, and we don't know what's going to happen. We've been told there's going to be a pool, but look on the final plat. It doesn't show where there's any pool. There's supposed to be a park. It doesn't show where there's any park. There's other things that's missing from that. Then the Corps' permit for Silverback Way talks about putting a 10-foot wide sidewalk to the west side of it to connect to the trails to the north. Well, I know our subdivision doesn't have trails, and Silverback's plats don't show that they have any trails in them either, even though we were told they were going to have trails. We've been told a lot. In the June 25th meeting, just prior to the vote, the developer got up, and you can look at the minutes now that they're up. We've had them for a while because we asked for them. That minimum lot size was going to be 1,600 square feet. Houses 200 to 250,000. In order to slow the traffic down, because that was a concern of our subdivision, the streets were going to have curves and angles in it, and a median strip. Well, yeah, they do have curves, they do have angles, but I have seen nothing on any drawing that shows there's any median strip in the subdivision. There is on the road that as a taxpayer I'm paying for, but not in the subdivision. But yet, he told the P&Z board just prior to the vote that was in there. Now, the other thing I'd like to bring up, I said the meeting I may have missed. And when I finish this, I do want every one of you to answer 2 questions. And as a citizen and a taxpayer, I think I deserve it, and everybody else does. The initial meeting was May 21st. Everybody expected that was going to fly through. If you read the minutes on that, the one commissioner on there said, could you please give us a plat next time we can read? The ordinances call for certain sizes. They got 2 8.5 by 11s put together for that whole plat, and you couldn't read the numbers on it. One of the commissioners stood outside and was talking to us afterwards and said, you know, we ought to consider putting a deed restriction of 2,000 square foot on these houses to tie in with your subdivision. The next meeting on June 25th, there was no talk whatsoever. There was no questions whatsoever. We couldn't figure out why until we spent $918.25 to get emails and documentation that we asked for, and I'll be glad to share them with you, and I won't charge you, that on Wednesday, or on Tuesday, Wednesday after the meeting, they called a special P&Z board member meeting. It says, subject, Planning Commission discussion of Silverback Landing plat. Every one of the P&Z board members was asked to be there, or actually it says required attendance, along with the city building official. That's a closed meeting. That should make everything dealing with Silverback illegal. The NOI for the Silverback Way has a checkbox in it that says, is there any historical sites within 1,000 feet? It was checked no. I happen to know that 3 of the high city officials here was out on the site around a year ago and actually took pictures of it. And we had somebody from the State Historical Society out there the other day, and that gentleman told him. He gave them their names. So that's falsifying a document when you know there's that historical of 2 Native American graves out there. I'd heard rumors. I've been out there now. I've seen part of the broken headstone. So I guess my question for you is, before you go to vote on this, first, and I want each one of you to say, for the record, 1, was this done correctly? 2, was it done transparently? And 3, was it done legally? And as a taxpayer and a citizen, I think I deserve, and everybody else deserves, each one of you to answer that, and nobody out here. And if you want to go back to the 105, yeah, you're giving them as the code as to how to answer me? The 105 was told in the July 10th meeting.
Just so you're aware, you're running around 6 minutes.
Okay, that's okay. I think the taxpayers need to know this. On the July 10th meeting, was asked about the 2105, and the city engineer said, oh, it was done under 102, 103, 104. But again, in these emails that we have, the city engineer asks the building official or tells him, I think that checklist is on your computer. And then later on, we get a copy of another email that says, oh, are you going to turn that list in? But when we get the email back from the city, it says no notes, because we asked for notes or checklist. It says no notes available, no checklist available. But there was a saying down at the bottom that says, by state law, if there is no documentation, you don't have to give them anything. Again, transparency, legal. I'd like for you to answer that question on, was this done correctly? Was it done legally? And was it done transparently?
Well,
Mayor, are you willing to answer? You're our top elected official up there.
You know, I'll answer. This is public input. This is not, yes it is, ma'am.
Hearing, that is correct.
And that's what this is. It's not question and answer time. We told you how we would address these questions at the end of this session. And that's how I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Bill will answer the 3 questions. I take it from Patrick's comment at the end of the session.
Okay.
To answer your questions at the end.
Okay, and I'll give you a copy of the email so you can see it.
While he's passing those out, is there anyone else for the public hearing? Going once, going twice? All right, if there are no further comments regarding the Rural Housing Incentive District, we will close the public hearing and proceed to commission discussion.
I have some questions for the people here who spoke today. My first question is, last time everybody was upset about stormwater, and now no one's saying anything about stormwater. You guys still upset about that?
I only had 3 minutes.
Okay.
But you used 7.
So we're talking about print size and lines in the road and trails and dates. I mean, I'm kind of curious, what are you guys really upset about? Did you come to our budget? If you're upset that the city commission isn't transparent, did you come and make any comment in our budget hearings? Any other housing development hearings? Why are you so upset about this one? Because it's in your backyard? Is that the answer?
You didn't pay attention. You didn't read any of the information.
It wasn't until we started getting all these emails that we just see how the city has been functioning.
I think you guys were here making comments before you got all these emails.
Right, on the stormwater, and I'm still concerned about the stormwater and the so-called retention pond. And if you'll give me a few more minutes, I'll talk about it.
I think we've heard all your comments before at different meetings. Well, we have. He's talked about them how many times?
Well, I'd like to make a comment about stormwater. I do have concerns about that, and I've talked about it at every meeting. You know, I question whether the box culvert would take care of the stormwater. I was told by Peter Oles it would. And then the last commission meeting, I don't know if you other commissioners got a copy of it, but Peter Oles gave me a copy of a detention pond that we're going to put in now. Now that's after we approved the final plat. So I don't know, without going back to planning and zoning, anytime you change a plat, anything in the plat, preliminary, final, I thought you had to take it back to planning and zoning so they could approve it. But getting back to the detention pond, I just thought that this was the first time I had heard anything about it. It wasn't during the meeting that it was brought up that we're going to put it in. I don't know who we are. I don't know if that's Mickey Venna. I don't know if that's the city. And I don't know why it was given to me before the meeting. I mean, that should be something that we discussed during the meeting if we are going to put a detention pond in to control this stormwater runoff. So yes, to me, I guess I don't have to wait till the end. Some of this I will answer on your transparency. I don't think it's been transparent. Some of the information that I have and the other commissioners didn't get. I don't know if you guys got a copy of that detention map. You did? Mm-hmm. But we didn't discuss it. We didn't discuss it in a meeting, so the public would know that we were going to, and who is we? Who are we that's going to put it in? Is it the developer or is it the city that's going to put in the detention pond? How much does it cost? Is it properly sized for the phase 1, 2, and 3. I was told it was. I don't have any idea. I know the county has contracted an engineering firm to study this, and I don't know, I'd like to hear from the county. If I've seen Mr. Murphy come in, if he has any thoughts on whatever they have reports from their engineer on this stormwater. Since we're talking about stormwater, I'd like to see if Mr. Murphy has any comments on that.
I think we need to clarify the process here, especially on the stormwater. The developer, the city, heard what you guys said about stormwater, and they went back and they accelerated the detention pond that they were going to do in phase 2.
I didn't know they was doing one in phase 2. Mickey said that he would talk to the college possibly later after this plan got approved and the development started for the need of a detention pond in phase 2. And then nothing was finalized that we were going to do a detention pond. He's going to have to talk to the college about getting some ground.
Well, not
to put that
necessarily.
in.
He can take some of his development land.
I don't know. I guess I wasn't privy to that information because I never heard him say that he
Well,
was
you know, he developed this detention pond in response to consumers' questions, concerns. And I think that shows that he is listening to what all these people are saying.
I can speak for the county if you'd like me to.
Go ahead. I'd like to hear from you.
Jeff Murphy, I'm the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners. So the county has been concerned about the stormwater and the drainage and flooding concerns, and these citizens have brought that to us. And we hired an engineer named Frank Young out of Uniontown. And he took a look at the plans. A lot of it was verbal with Mr. Earls because there are no final plans on the stormwater drainage. They're in the process of creating that. And so the county's discussed it fairly thoroughly, and I think the place we come to, speak up Carl if I'm wrong, but I think we've decided that we're not really comfortable with the plan until it's finalized, until you provide that. So,
I'm Carl Wood, County Commissioner of the 3rd District. I agree with Jeff. We had Frank over there today for about 45 minutes. The county paid for his consulting. And like Jeff says, we are not satisfied. These plans are a long ways from being done. And that is our concern, is the stormwater that's coming out. We don't know what's going to happen. He says one thing, then it drops. So I feel before you guys move any further, I think you better have a plan down and in place, what it is, and be approved. And then we'll have our consultant, Frank Young, look at it.
What exactly did Frank say to you?
What did Frank tell? Just what I just got done saying. Did you hear me?
Did he agree with Earl?
You what?
Did he agree with Earl or not?
No, Jeff, would you answer that?
I didn't hear the answer to my question.
Well, Jeff's going to give it to you because he is an engineer and I am not an engineer. I apologize for that. So they want to know, would you repeat the question?
I think Frank, I think he's comfortable with what's been done that he can look at, but he doesn't have all the details to analyze.
It's not a complete plan.
It's not complete.
It's not drawn. So, just like the detention or retention pond, how big a pipe it's going to be that goes out of there. It's not there. There was concern today about flooding coming down from the streets. I don't know what the name of that street is. What are we going to do with that water?
I think there was a lot of concerns with the existing subdivision to the north and how that's going to tie in. And like you said, what's going to happen with that stormwater that I don't think's been addressed at all, which would be really important to these citizens to understand for their own properties. So.
And there was a waterway that was there that wasn't addressed. They say they have a little problem with it right now, and it wasn't addressed in the plans. So the bottom line is, I can't speak for Frank, or I feel that the plans are not completed to go forward until the plans are completed.
I feel it's important to understand where we are in this process as well, that what we're voting on tonight is the Rural Housing Incentive District, which creates the area that will allow for the developer to do what he's doing. We're not voting on a final plat. At this point in the process, there is no need for a final plat. That is something that the city will deal with as it arises, that we will approve, that we'll have transparency, that the staff will be very involved with. That's not what we're voting on tonight. Right now, we had the hearing earlier, and what we're voting on right now is the Rural Housing Incentive District, which will allow the development to happen at all, right? And so
the commissioners, according to statute, have to make a decision as to whether this will adversely affect Crawford County. That's what the statute says.
Correct.
So we've got to understand that ourselves, and we're telling you our concerns.
Sure.
So I think you need to keep in mind, though, that, this is the city of Pittsburgh in Crawford County. I believe that the developer is working in good faith to solve the stormwater, to accelerate what he doesn't have to do by our requirements, but accelerating that plan to address everyone's needs. This is economic development for contractors, a lot of businesses in Crawford County. So I think you need to be very careful.
One of the other commissioners, I think, was talking to somebody, and I suppose I can say it, about maybe being kind of threatened if this does not go through, that we will never get a chance again to go for one of these.
I don't know that
I don't feel that was appropriate. I kind of talk out, but when this commissioner, I'm not going to mention no names, I think that was an unnecessary action.
That was on your meeting.
Huh?
That was in your meeting. I mean, what you're not saying was you said in your meeting, so I don't think you have to be coy about it.
Well,
and I don't think we're threatening. We're just saying that.
But
that
what do I
there's
do with it?
This is you have to understand where we are in the process.
But you also have to understand the people that we got downstream for a mile, and then the other way. Just like now, the South Route Street. Sure, that is going to be a good improvement. But where all's the water going right now? It's going across the man's field that already has low spots, and it's just fanning out into his field. That's in the county. So he's been talking to me, and I've been talking to the other commissioner. So we've got to take care of it. We wasn't consulted at all about South Route Street. Not one iota at all. And I don't think that was right.
And that wasn't right because it borders the county? I mean, why
But what I'm saying, all the wastewater comes out into us. Then we got to contend with it. And we have people there. We got 4 people that's got kind of what they're called water oak trees now because there's a little bit of a swamp there now. We have a drainage problem. I said we, the city and the county does. So we add all this water down to us. They say there's no more water. I disagree. I think there's more water because it didn't get absorbed in the ground coming down the ditches. So we're going to have to take and correct that problem in this person's field, or it's just going to be a big marsh.
So what I hear you saying is that if we approve the ordinance tonight and you do not see a final plans for the detention pond and how to address the stormwater, that you will exercise your right to deny the RID.
We're not saying that.
Okay, well,
there you go again. You're trying to put words in our mouth.
No, I'm trying to understand.
No, but let's just flip the shoe. Let's just flip it around. If we was dumping stuff in on use, what would you do?
We would probably call you and not just show up at a meeting.
Well, why should we? I mean, isn't this a public meeting?
No, but from the very beginning,
it's a public meeting.
You didn't.
No. I'm cool.
No, you're not. You have been confrontational every time you've come up here.
And disrespectful.
You haven't come up here trying to
Okay, let me ask you this, Patrick.
No, I'm still talking.
Go ahead and talk, please.
Never come up here with any idea of working anything out. You've come up here in a confrontational manner, belligerent, all the other things you want to put behind it. And I don't think that's a healthy or a good way to come to a resolution for the county, for the citizens of Pittsburgh. I don't think that's a good way to come to a good resolution for all of us.
Well, okay, you done now, 'cause I speak? Okay, you're saying all this, and all of a sudden, the last time I was up here, we was talking about detention and retention ponds, But all of a sudden now there's a drawing on there that wasn't going to be done before from her. You know, we didn't have to put one in because it was a residential, not commercial. But now we have this. So if I wouldn't have come up here the last time, would this have been done, Patrick?
I can't answer that
Well,
question.
neither can I. And something else, you know, you're talking about professionalism. These people was up here talking. And you're going to lump all their questions into one or try to put something, you know, not answer their questions. You should have took them as they come through.
We can structure our meeting how.
Yeah,
we
that's
see
fine.
best.
I understand. I really do. But I don't think that Jeff and I and Tom has our mind made up which way it's going to go. We paid $2,500 for a consultant, and we're going to use him.
Good.
So don't think that, hey, we're negative on this. No, because it's more tax dollars for everybody. But if
I'm glad you realize that.
Well, hey, but I want to tell you, you know, this is part of the county. This is what generates revenue for the county, for the city, and for the school district. Now, is that correct?
In terms of the.
What are you talking about? You
Oh,
talking about
nothing.
silverback
Property
land?
tax.
Property tax.
Sure.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, what do you got?
If we decide to go with this rural and scenic district tonight, the school board, are they exempt from being part of?
We're in the process of looking at that. I can't give you a affirmative answer on it. I don't know, Chuck.
Well, that's the whole thing is, within 30 days, if they decide that it's going to be an adverse effect on the school district, they can opt out of it, sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
And the county, the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
If they're within 30 days, all I'm saying is, why don't we let the county complete their engineering study? And it might say that, you know, hey, this is the same thing that Pete Earl says without Pete having any dimensions on anything. I can understand. We don't know what he's got, but I think you ought to have sizes of the
But we don't
detention
have
pond
it.
pipes.
It's incomplete.
So I'm
Chuck.
saying, why don't we let this study or engineer study come forward? And because if we don't, within 30 days, you guys can say, hey, this is going to have an adverse effect on the county. And then how do you get the property tax to pay this developer off in 15 years if the county's not going to be part of it, if the school's not going to be part of it?
So
I said, let's just slow down and let this engineer come up with his final, maybe get with Pete, maybe they both can work.
They've done that. They've
They
done,
have?
yeah.
But
Well, the problem
he's
is we're early in the process and there's no final plans.
But if you approve one tonight, the way I understand it,
When would you have a final plan?
we got 30 days.
That's what I'm reading here.
Right,
We
you
got
have 30
Not
days.
approving a
So
plan.
right now,
No,
like
the
I
resolution
said,
for the
you know,
development.
Frank, it's not complete. It's an incomplete plan. So he shouldn't have to do the study. We hired him to review it.
Right.
Pete, can you explain when you would have a final plan and what would happen after that?
Pardon?
The plans will be done the end of this week, the first of next. We told Frank that we would send him all the completed plans and documentation to show him the size of the pond and where we got the size of the pond from. It's designed based on a 25-year storm event, but it also shows what'll happen in a 50 and 100-year storm event. And all of that documentation will go to Frank. And he's right, we gave him preliminary stuff and we told him it was preliminary because the final plans haven't been drawn up yet. But they're in the process of being drafted this week. We should have them done hopefully by the end of this week, but at the very latest, it'll be the first of next.
But, you know, on that there, most of them plans said, you know, you had 4 to 5 weeks on different things. So how can we do a study, you know,
4 to
with
5
that?
weeks on
4 to 5 weeks on some of, I don't know whether it's on the retention pond or something that you put down, that you had 4 to 5 weeks before you'd have a final draft on. I can't tell you what it is because I don't really remember.
No, we should have
But
everything
see,
done by next week.
there you go, you know, if we don't have, you know, Frank's gonna have to look at it. You know, it's really our nickel, but we want it to fly, but we want it done correctly because we'll be the one to get the repercussion off of it.
Pete, whose cost is that detention pond? Is the cities or the developers?
Developer.
It's developers, okay.
Developer decided to put that in, and as far as the platting, you don't replat it, you simply file a drainage easement, just like you would on any existing property.
Well, let me
So
ask
it's
you
not
this, if
replatted.
your plan is gonna be done within a week or two, would you oppose letting the county's engineer have his time to study it, maybe come up with the same idea you have?
Oh, no, we don't have any problem. We've been working with Frank
So
since
we
they
don't need
hired
to
him,
take any
and
action
so-
tonight, maybe wait till next meeting and find out what you...
I don't think it should be rushed, you know, when they have their plans all done, say, hey, this is what we got, and then let Frank study it. I mean, I don't know whether there's a big push to do this tonight with you people. I don't know.
I don't know, is there a deadline we have to do it tonight?
I think the idea is you pass the writ, it starts at 30 days. Is 30 days not enough time to review what Pete's final plans that he's gonna have done in a week? I guess that's a question for the county and Frank.
When we get it. I mean, you
Can
know,
we
he
just-
says in a week,
I mean-
that cuts us down to 3 weeks. I mean, roughly. And the plans, you know, I'm no engineer, but I don't know how much complete we need to have them complete. That you didn't say.
Well, I think tonight, what we're looking at is to adopt a plan for the development of housing and public facilities in this proposed thing. And in order to move on, I mean, I think all those, the final plans, those are important, yes. But you have to make this step before you can make that step.
Correct.
And I think that's where we are. Because we make this step does not mean that we will go forward with this development. It just means that we're in the pot. Is that not correct?
Well, the developer has actually signed a development agreement, and it's got certain deadlines in it, and the ordinance adopts that development agreement and plan. And so at that point, the developer will be on the hook to comply with that development agreement and plan.
Okay.
Yeah. Mickey, did you want to come up and...
I really don't know what I can say that hadn't been said, but I was under the impression that the project had been accepted by the city, and this was a vote on the RID. I will say this, that the city, Darren, called me up and said, you know, we're getting a lot of people that really wants to make sure the flooding is controlled. And we feel like from our engineers, Mr. Earls, that a detention pond couldn't hurt, would help. Would you be willing to do that? Of course I said yes. And so that's where that detention pond came in. It's sitting in an area that, you know, it doesn't affect the lots. And so we are spending the money to put it in.
Would you be opposed to waiting for the county's engineer after they get Pete Earl's final size, dimension, let the county's engineer look at it, maybe possibly think, well, yeah, this is right, and wouldn't that be a better way to go about this than then?
I don't think that's my decision to make. All I know is my engineer, Pete Earls, feels very comfortable that it works.
I understand that, but I know there's an issue with the county, and they have their own engineer, and I think if we work together with them, maybe we can get to the end we want to. I'm not opposed to this project, your development. I don't think anybody in Bittner's Addition's opposed to it, or the county. They just want to, excuse me?
Didn't say
Oh.
anything.
They just want to make sure it's done right, and that's all I'm asking. Just let their engineer look at what Pete's come up with, and especially, you know, there's a pond on the map. Don't know what size the pond is. We don't know what kind of inlets or whatever pipes going into it. Maybe there's got to be a certain size for your acreage. I don't know. I'm not an engineer.
And I'm
Pete
not
is.
either.
So I think if them two, Pete comes up with the sizes, county's engineer looks at it, says it's go, I think we'd be better off to go that route.
Okay. But once again, I don't
Sure.
think that's my decision to make.
Sure.
So is there
it's
any
council.
unintended consequences if we were to just delay this 2 weeks for you?
Not that I know of.
Okay. The other thing, which is not your question, but to city staff, this RID is for phase 1.
Correct.
So I think the pond and the pool, those are further, those are phase 2. So.
Well, the new detention pond will be in phase
Right,
1.
but in terms of the amenities.
Yeah, the pool is in phase 2. The park is in phase 1.
So Is the
And
developer?
it's right in the middle of the plat. I don't know how I missed it.
Is the developer required to have phase 2 and 3 all developed out for us? Or do we look at those final plans when we look at those individual phases? I mean, what is the requirement?
This is just phase 1, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, but people are talking about they don't know about the pool or the community center. Well, that's not in this phase, correct?
The pool is not in this phase, but the park is.
The park is, okay.
Yes.
So during phase 2 and phase 3, things could change from lot size to house sizes or not? That stays the same?
That I'm not positive of. I don't know why we'd change it, and I believe this is a question for maybe Mr. McGinney. I think the city would have to approve changes, I believe. I do know that I want to tell you I am willing to go ahead and put that second detention pond in if we're able to do that. If
I
that
didn't know
helps.
about that one either.
Well, that's the main one that we're talking about in phase 2.
The one that we're talking, there's only
Right.
one detention
Well,
pond.
yeah.
Well, there was originally drawn up, we had talked about putting one in phase 2 on ground roughly that the college owns,
Right.
right in there. It was on the college's ground, right, Darren?
Correct.
Okay, and so if that can come about and that helps the situation, we obviously would be willing to do that. The last thing we want to do is flood neighbors downstream,
Well,
so.
Pete told me when he gave me that plan that the detention pond that is phase 1 will handle phase 2 and phase 3 along with phase 1.
Once again, I see no reason why it would not, but I am not an engineer.
So they can get the size, Pete to have the sizes, the pipes and everything, maybe to answer all the questions. Like I said, my request that we hold off till a couple weeks until the county engineer can study this, maybe get with Pete and say, hey, yeah, this is great, let's do it.
Pete, can I ask you a question? Can you come back? Nobody, if you're not at the podium, nobody can hear you at home, so that's why you're walking you up. So when you do the final design, where does it go from there? Does somebody have approval, or, I mean, you're not just, I can design whatever I want. I mean, obviously the county wants to look at it. Who else is gonna look at it that's an agency outside of the city, so we know that we're not just being irresponsible with the rules around stormwater?
As far as stormwater, it goes to the NOI. The NOI is the permit that we have to get from the state. And that gets sent in based on the final plans. So along with sending it to the state for water and sewer review, we also send it to the city, and then we send it to the state for the NOI, which is the stormwater erosion control review. And that's the permit that we get, which then goes, the contractor then puts together what's called a swap plan to make sure that's all taken care of. The pond that's there will actually be used as a sedimentation basin during construction. Then after construction, it'll become the permanent detention pond.
So if it's a sediment basin, do they have to clean it out for the permanent, or?
Correct. When the construction's done, they'll go in there and clean out the detention pond then to the actual
Now,
the
let me
depths
ask
that
you
we need.
this, maybe it's completely off the subject, but I've seen some detention ponds, and is this gonna be the same way the ones I see up on North Michigan, that we let all kinds of trees and brush and everything grow up in there? I thought a detention pond was to be, for stormwater to be able to go in and hold. Now, if you've got a lot of brush and stuff in there.
That's a
it's-
retention. That's a
What's the thing?
retention, no.
That's a retention and detention?
Detention.
There is difference.
They're two different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
All
they
right,
are.
so we
And
can
the-
let it go,
yeah, and
grow
the
up
one-
wild.
Well, we
Yes, that's
usually,
Oh, it's like.
yeah, we put the sides at a 4-to-1 so it can be mowed. The idea is that you
Sure.
keep it mowed. They do allow trees and stuff to grow in them, but the problem is a lot of times they'll flood out in a big storm event.
That's what I thought.
And so most cases, we tell people just keep the trees and so on out of there and just keep it mowed.
Right. And I
Trees
think
to the outside on the
You're
edges.
talking about the detention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I seen one down, I don't know if down in front of someplace on the college, there's a creek, housing.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff on South Rouse growing up in that. I don't know if that's.
And they
what-
do, and it's
It's
somewhat lack of maintenance.
Well, and because
Yeah.
the ground has been so soft, we haven't been able to get in there and do.
That's
what we
the other
need to.
problem.
So,
You
yeah,
get
we're
into
well
and
aware
when
of
there's a
our
lot of
detention
rain,
pond.
it just,
But that
Yeah.
didn't happen in this summer. I mean, it's been over a few years, right?
Yeah, when we built.
but it's happened in other detention ponds that
Yeah.
we've had, and then they had to go in there and take the trees out, and it's a lot more work, because then you gotta redo the bottom and everything else. It's much easier if we just keep it mowed
Sure,
to begin with.
understandable.
Yep.
Is there some, County Commissioner Murphy, if Pete's going to finish the design, your engineer's already seen the preliminary plat with the plan for the detention pond. If his final design has to get approved by the state, is there some reason you think you wouldn't agree with the state in the end and you would still do something different?
Well, as I understand it, his construction.
Jeff, can you come up, Jeff?
Okay,
Please, sorry.
Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think the construction stormwater plan, which is for erosion during construction, is approved by the state.
Correct.
The final design of all the piping that goes into the stormwater under the streets and into this retention pond is approved by the city. The state has nothing.
There's no authority after that?
No.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thanks.
So that's, I guess we're concerned with both those issues, so.
Yeah, not a problem. We'll work with Frank. I don't have any problem getting everything to him, so.
But we probably wouldn't be at the point where the state's approved you in a month. You would just have your final drawing submitted for Frank to review, but we wouldn't have the state approved.
We'll turn around and submit the NOI, but yeah, the state can take 30 days themselves to get that.
So nothing was done until the state approves it? I don't know.
Well, I think Jeff said it well. That's
you know,
on
as
the
far as going
stormwater
out for
management.
bids or anything, you mean? No.
That's just on the stormwater management during construction. The reality is, what the county's saying is, and the question I think we have, the big question is, if Pete gets this out in a week, if there's 30 days from today that they have a chance to, pass a resolution saying that they think there's an adverse impact, will their engineer have time, knowing what he knows about our city regs and what he's already seen of your design in those 3 weeks, to make that call? I think that's really the question that I hear that's being asked. And
So Earl, do you think that the county's engineer would have time in those 2.5 or 3 weeks?
Well, I don't know what Frank's schedule is, so I really
that.
can't answer that. As far as, we'll give him all the data, we'll give him all the computer programs that we've used to design the stormwater. And so as I talked to Frank, he just basically said, if you get me all the data, I'll look through it, and I don't see that there'll be a big issue. So hopefully there's not.
Darren, do we want to go through any of these questions that we've?
yeah, I think that's how we're planning on going. So, first question I wrote down: Article 2, Section 105 of the subdivision regs is not met. There's more than 4 lots, and obviously, I'm going to look for Dexter because I can't answer any of these questions. Can you speak to that, or Cameron? Sorry, that is not Dexter. That's Cameron.
When the final plat and the preliminary plat were brought before the commission for approval, it was explained then that there had been an error in the listing it as a short plat, which is the 4 or less lots. The plan was, or the plat was reviewed as a preliminary and final plat, and that was what was brought before the commission, and that's what the governing body approved.
So Article 2, Section 101 from Ms. Linder, just July 10th, the mayor and city council approved a plat. Both of them at the same meeting, you're saying?
Right, and that is allowable.
August 14th, June 27th was mistaken in the minutes or in the notations instead of June 25th. So
I think that was.
Apologize for that. I'm not sure.
That was a memo from staff to Darren, so I don't.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So we're left with the impression from public inputs that approving the preliminary and the final plat at the same time is not within our regulations. Why? What gives us the permission to do that?
It's not the way that most plans get moved forward. As much discussion had gone on with the involvement with the RID, it just made sense to go ahead and put them through at the same time rather than hold up the process.
But there's no rule against that.
Right.
There's no rule against it?
I have a question. The first time I heard about the planning and zoning meeting to approve the preliminary and the final plot, how come the residents in the area wasn't notified in advance. I mean, they found out through somebody, and then word of mouth, it spread that there was going to be a meeting that night or the next night to approve this. I thought within 200 feet, they had to have a letter.
For the variance, there is a requirement for that, and it was not sent out then. That's why that had been pulled from the agenda that evening. And they went ahead and pulled everything for the following meeting. So no action was taken on that initial to make sure that all residents were given the proper notifications on that.
Did you know that they weren't, before they said something to you about it, that his
yes.
letters wasn't sent out?
Yeah, we found out shortly after we'd sent out the agenda that there was a mistake, and that we just went ahead and at the meeting pulled it.
Next question, Mrs. Brooks. The difference in the math problem for the land, the 19.73 acres was the northeast corner, a heavily wooded area that was practically, well, I would never want to say unusable because I'm not a lumberjack or a farmer, but the adjacent property owner made us a deal immediately to buy that, so it was sold. Hi. Where's a certificate of the preliminary plat, and it was never stamped?
They went, since they went through it the same meeting, there was an opportunity to pull that out and stamp that and resubmit. It was all part of the same process there. So everyone saw that the preliminary had been approved by commission, then commission went ahead and voted on the final.
The plat filed, this is Mr. Strength. The plat filed had a 5 foot rather than a 7 foot for the side yard. The difference, the discrepancy there?
5 yard is what's required of an R1B, which is what the zoning had been approved for. The 7 foot is what the developer plans on constructing and still plans on constructing with the 7 foot side yard.
But that's still in the 7 foot side yard?
He still has plans to do the 7 foot side yard. The R1B, the minimum side is 5 foot, so that's what was put on there.
But
correct.
It could be over 5
yes,
foot?
We addressed the pool and the park in phase 1. Sidewalks, don't see a trail. Are there plans for a trail? In later phases, or even the first phase, I guess.
I think one of the things that we talked about long term is trying to utilize some of the creek areas as walking trails in the future. And I know that was part of Becky's vision while she was here. You've got the draw heading up to the west there. You also have the potential of going to the east and doing something along the creek there. So yes, there is long-term intent to do connections to trails that don't necessarily go through the subdivisions.
The next question was on a medium strip in the actual residential streets. I'm assuming that was a misconception because I've seen every design provided, and other than the median that was going to the Silverback, Silverback Way that leads up to the development. I've never seen a median strip in anything, but if that's not correct, I'm pretty sure it is. May 21st meeting, I just wrote one commissioner said something. I apologize. I didn't get a very good note on that one. Wednesday called a special P&Z board meeting for the plat. That is a closed meeting. Is that the one we were referring to earlier when you were discussing that they didn't get notified, so you pulled it? Or
no, this was the public meeting that the regularly scheduled planning and zoning.
Any idea if we violated that, why we violated that? And
that indicated it was a special meeting, and you're saying it was a regular meeting?
No, when we pulled it from the agenda, that was the regular meeting there. This was, if you would, a working session there. The no votes were taken. Allowed the board members to ask any question they had about the proposed subdivision and plat. And so I say there were no votes that were taken then. I say it was just purely informational meeting so they could sit there and ask any questions needed. We want to have everyone there so it wouldn't be a case of trying to recreate a dialogue that happened.
In these meetings, how come nobody from planning and zoning asked anything about stormwater runoff?
Because for a plat, per our standards, there's no requirement for a plat of land to be set aside for stormwater. when you get into the design, that's when you can take a look at what's required. Same type thing for commercial industrial development. There's no requirement for you to have it unless it meets a certain runoff coefficient. We worked with the developers based on what their needs and what they're looking at. When Norman Miller went in and divided his properties up there where Tractor Supply went, he wanted to have a community detention pond area. We worked with him, and there was one that was platted as part of that project that still remains a private detention pond, but it is on its separate parcel. We have other areas of town where we've platted, and we haven't had any specific area that is set aside for detention. It's up to each individual parcel, depending on what's constructed there, how it's constructed, and what its runoff requirements are, that it has to be done as part of its design at that point in time. So there's a little bit of misconception that we have a plat, that we have the final road design, we have the final sewer design. That's not a part of the platting. The platting is simply dividing up the property into legal pieces to be bought and sold.
The next bullet I have is the NOI. There are any historical sites within a 500-foot area. Myself, Jay Byers, Henry, and several others, I think 4 years ago, went out and looked for a rock that said that it was had an Indian mark on it. That's not in the land swap area. It was on a stream bed to the southeast. I don't know what historical is referring to, but I don't have an answer for why we didn't mark that an Indian rock that we found was historical, but I'm assuming there's a lot of Indian rocks laying all over this county.
Well, it was within 1,000 feet that you had to mark that it was a
I
historical.
do not know where the site is at, so I can't tell you if it's within 1,000 feet or not. And
Does it have to be?
I don't know what
state
what do you mean by
designated?
historical? I mean,
Yeah.
Commissioner Munsell, I mean, there was no mark. I mean, what's historical? I'm assuming.
I don't know.
I'm assuming Memorial Auditorium's historical. I'm not sure a rock.
But the question is, does there have to be a state designation? Just
I don't know, and I don't know. I mean,
okay.
have you had experience with that, Pete?
When we turn in the NOI, one of the things we have to do is also send that to the State Historical Society, as well as Wildlife and Parks and a few others. And so that's where they look at it and say, is there anything in that area of construction that's a concern? And they came back and said, no. We'll do the same thing on Silverback Landing. We'll do the same thing, send the letters out to all the agencies and see if they have any comments or requirements to come back with. So that's where we take care of that, is basically in the NOI process. But I did not know anything about that.
Well, I kind of knew something about it because I worked with the guy that got books from the cemeteries. Somebody went through and plotted every grave in Crawford County, I guess. And it's in the, I think you can get a copy of it in the college library. And I thought it would be historical that an Indian grave tombstone would be in an area that is located in Crawford County. But, you know, that's what I think is historical now.
But it would be up to this, I'm sorry.
Well,
I don't know if
I
it
guess
meets the
Memorial
state's
Auditorium
definition
historical
for
too,
historical.
but-
I do not make that call.
So it's a state. We'd
It
Oh,
is
the
rely
state
on-
marked it,
Historical
that there was
Society that
nothing
looks
there?
at that and decides
Okay.
what it is or not.
When
The
he
state
submit-
would-
Well, when he submits the paperwork, you would also submit to the Historical
Correct.
Society. If they come back and say, yes, that is a designated
I
historical.
assume they look at their maps,
Right.
what they have for designated areas in the process. And in that case, they're looking at just where the street was being built. And if you're going to disturb anything in that right of way, and we weren't. And so in the subdivision, it'll be the same thing. They'll look at that area and around that's going to be disturbed, which of course will be a much larger area.
Can I just say, as a legal member of a federally recognized Native American tribe, that I do appreciate that somebody is caring enough about Indian heritage to want to bring it up. But I would also argue that if there are 2 Indian graves 1,000 feet away, that there are probably Indian graves under every other step that you take in this whole country. This country was built in way on the backs of the Native Americans. So I appreciate that you all are concerned about this, but I would just bet that anywhere in Pittsburgh that you could find similar.
Well, this
sites.
one had coordinated location where it was, so I thought that might be a little more than anywhere else in Pittsburgh.
Nobody
I
told me
wonder
that.
if it does materialize that there are these two grave sites. When we send this to NOI, there's no reason that that area could not be set aside when we get to the place where we're developing all of this property.
I think, as he said, it's not actually in the development area, but now that we know about it, obviously we'll tag it and show where that is when we send in this next NOI.
I think that's a good idea, Patrick. So.
Yeah.
Are we good? The next one I have is a July 10th as a checklist on somebody's computer, or wasn't on somebody's computer, or.
The checklist that was being referenced was actually in accordance with the variance that was being requested. That was the checklist that I was thinking of at that point in time. And so when I said, Dexter, go ahead and send that, the request was not for the checklist on the variance. That's why there was not one that was sent to. The request was on the plat as far as the checklist.
Back to Mr. Strength's, he does not like the website. It's a disaster. You know, the website's a continuous work in process. It's you know, it's an effort. The transparency, P&Z transparency, there's no agenda. The only thing really in that I can speak to that I know about was the comment that the minutes from the previous meeting didn't show up until right after the next meeting. I think that was generally because they approved the minutes, but I'm looking at Tammy and she's like, don't drag me into this. But I know that anytime we have public meetings, we take agendas seriously. I can appreciate that any individual does not like our website. I get it. Everybody's got their own preference. I think but I think I would be remiss if I did not at least say that the continual discussion that somehow the city purposely misleads or is not transparent is just ludicrous. That woman has been a city clerk here for longer than I should probably care to say publicly. She is responsible for most of that, although we have so many new boards and commissions that we're usually tasked with having one of the members become the secretary, because I'm not going to have Tammy go to 52 meetings a year. So sometimes we're at the mercy of those members. It is never our attempt to mislead or to not put something out there that isn't accurate. As far as how the website looks and acts and where things can be found, I personally can't find 90% of the stuff I look for on it, because that's on me. It's not that there's anything wrong with the website, but it's never an attempt to mislead. It's never an attempt, as Cameron, I think, stated, to have a meeting where nobody comes. What's the case almost all the time is we have numerous meetings and nobody ever shows up, no matter how much we do. So I do want to acknowledge Tammy and her effort to do that, and I do want to apologize for the fact that if you're looking for an agenda or you're looking for minutes and you can't find them on there, I'm sorry, and for heaven's sakes, call the city clerk, because we still have telephones, we still have people at the city, and we still are trying very hard. I do appreciate the 20 bullets that we just ran through. I also know there was a pretty good jab at the city for the bill for, we don't set the bill for pulling together 2,500 emails. I think a lot of the freedom of information stuff we just do and we don't bill anybody. But when you get into 60 staff hours, it's going to take away from us doing the normal work that we do. So there was a bill with that. The gentleman that asked for the freedom of information request was very polite. He was very patient. He got it on time, I think. And when he picked it up, he was very complimentary. So I hope however that translated into bullets and where you land on these bullets and your issues, we get it. But I do appreciate the fact that people were responsible enough to take the time to make the request. And I hope you understand that we spent a lot of time on our side making it legible, so when you got it back, it wasn't just gibberish and you didn't have to come back with oh, the city's just jerking us around. That is never our intent. I realize there's a lot of animosity on this subject, but we have tried to do everything that we can. I am out of bullets. I'm sure I missed one. If I missed one from the commission, please let me know. I appreciate Cameron standing up there because I know that's not fun. It's not fun to try to write them down and ask them, and I know it's no fun to answer them. But with that, we still have the RID in front of us. We have I think the question is 2.5 or 3 weeks enough for the county? I appreciate the county coming. We've tried to track with them as much as we can. The question does come up, why hasn't the county been notified? Why hasn't the county this? Why hasn't the county that? I said it last meeting, I believe, and I'm going to say it again. We do everything that we're required. The county flood administrator, I think is the title, was copied on I know the report that we did for Silverback. I'm sure they'll be copied on the final report that Pete's going to design. We never do anything with the thought of, oh heck, it's just the county. We're in the county. We all live in Crawford County. There's 105 counties in Kansas, and the most important one is Crawford County. So we do get it, but hopefully the county will have some time to look at this, and we've already talked to the school district. I'm pretty sure where they stand, but they also don't have the issue with flood water running into the county. We're not sending flood water into the school district, so I understand your concern. Hopefully you understand that our willingness to work with you. I would hope we don't delay this because I don't think this is a problem that should take 3 or 2.5 weeks to study. We already know the city's rules. Pete will have his stuff when he has it. And I believe the man's name is Frank, has already looked this over and should be pretty familiar. If he's looking for sizes of pipes and flows like that, he should be, that's why we hired an engineer to do it. We should do it pretty quick. But obviously I'll shut up now and turn it back over to the commission.
If you're going to shut up, I'm going to say 2 things. One, I appreciate all of that information that Cameron gave us. He gave it to us extemporaneously. He obviously knew what the hell he was talking about, and I want to applaud you for that. And I also appreciate all the citizens that have come here expressing their concerns. And I hope that they are aware that we have addressed some of their concerns. I'm not sure some of their concerns are able to be addressed. But I hope you understand that we all have not dozed through your comments, and that we take it to heart, and we take this job that we do seriously. And beyond that, I move to approve ordinance number S-1056.
Can I comment before we?
We can have discussion if there's a second.
Discussion? Sure. I'd also like to thank the citizens for coming forward with their concerns. I think it's a legitimate concern. I don't think if it had been raised about stormwater and the issue of trying to control it, nothing would have been done with it. You know, we would have put this development in and the stormwater would have went somewhere. But at least the citizens, and I asked questions about it, I think by doing so, you know, we have come up to maybe a solution. I would like to see us wait till next meeting to take action on this tonight, because that would give the Pete time to finish up whatever sizes he needs to have. And also lets the county engineer get on board with it and see if it's feasible. But I do appreciate the public input, because we work for the public, and sometimes I think some of us forget that. You know, we don't make a lot of money, and maybe we shouldn't, but I do know who I work for, and I appreciate you coming forward and voicing your concerns.
And so there's a motion on the table to approve.
Mayor?
Yes,
Mayor,
sorry.
We have
you
Garth
can't miss
Herman
it, he's
here.
6'5", but Garth is here from the, before you guys vote, I mean, he may be able to I mean, he's the expert on the RID. I think Henry just asked him if there's anything you want to add before we take a vote, because it's going to be the last vote of the day.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I just wanted to briefly say, well, I guess first of all, Garth Herman with Gilmore and Bell, the city's special counsel on the RHID project. I just want to make sure that with regards to the timing, and I know there's been some discussion about, if we can postpone it for a couple of weeks. So there's the 30-day nullification period under the RHID statute, where both the school district and the county commission have a chance to adopt a resolution basically against the RHID. That 30 days starts from the date the public hearing is held. So the public hearing that was held today, so the 30 days starts from there. So we really would not be able to delay the start of that 30 days for 2 weeks if that's a process that the commission decides, and a majority of the commission decides they want to move on. Then basically we would go back to the actions that we took back in August, where the city commission would need to consider a new resolution to set a date for a new public hearing in order to provide the statutory notices, both published and mailing, that the RHID state law requires. So that's just something I just want to make sure that everybody had that in mind with regards to, if there is part of this discussion about pushing it back, that it would actually push it back not by 2 weeks, but a longer period than that. Thank you.
That's why we have Garth.
This guy knows what he's talking about.
Thanks, Garth. Sorry about that. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, Mayor.
Okay, so Patrick's motion still stands on the table to approve the RHID. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion passes.
No, I think we turned what Pete did and then what Frank did around in a week. So I have all the confidence that that we can do what we need to do in 30 days. Because they've already shown good faith effort in getting things done, Frank and the commissioners getting Frank on board. So I have no doubts we'll be able to have a positive outcome.
All right, any non-agenda reports or requests from staff?
Yeah, I have one. What's the status on Rise Development and West Fifth Street property?
Rise is a busy guy. Let me just say that. Justin Benster is the owner of Rise. He has signed a development agreement. He has not signed the deed. I'm looking at Henry. There was some issues with the title. I believe he tried to change the name of his titling company, and we explained to him that you have to title it under. We signed the development agreement. The commission approved the development agreement with you. So that's been cleaned up. Quentin's in constant contact with him. He's just, I don't know if you've noticed, but developers tend to do things in their own time, and our job is to chase them and get them to work in our time frames.
We've got a developer out there.
I know. That's why I was looking at you and not Mickey. But I think we're in a good place. I think he's a busy guy. He intends to build a building. As soon as I feel like he won't, or something's changed on his end that's significant, I will let you know. I don't know if that's a very good answer, but I mean,
so
he doesn't work
no
for me.
time frame for the deed signing?
When somebody tells me my attorney's reviewing the title work, you know, that's interpreted however you want to interpret that. I just had a text from him this afternoon. So yeah, I mean, he seems serious about doing it. It's a big project. He's a long ways away, and he's got other projects, but I feel like it's moving forward.
We've received our payment for the lot?
No, that will come. The payment will come with the deed.
Okay.
And that's the trick on getting the title work, because we can't. He can change the name of his company to anything he wants afterwards, but he has to file the deed under what he came up here and asked for. So not knowing that, because he's not here, he sent in the wrong paperwork, so we had to, of course, send it back and say, da, da, da. But yeah, I mean, Quentin, feel free to add anything. But yeah, great question, Chuck. That's, it's one more developer we're working with. We're trying to get them to do their thing. North Walnut's been going on for 5 years. So but it's about to take off. So great question.
What about the buildings on either side? What's the status of working with Fifth Street and Dittman's?
We have worked with Dittman's considerably. He sent over a letter outlining some things that he would need to do to make some decisions. So some things we were able to partner with him on as far as some cost sharing on some engineering work and other things that get expensive when you're just trying to find facts. Some of the other things, like a sidewalk, is something that we know right up front. We have a sidewalk program as part of the sales tax, so we have a contractor already working for us. He wanted to use his own contractors, so we had to negotiate how that was going to be paid for, and basically we will pay for half up to the amount that our contractor would have done it for. If he wants to use his own and pay more, he can, but we'll still. So we've looked at the building, the walls were the biggest thing, how the cost sharing that's going on there. I believe we made an offer to Fifth Street on their shared wall. I don't know that we have the final estimate on Mr. Dittman's wall, but we've been in contact with all of them. And I think with the exception of the weeds that are on the vacant lot, which, you know, weeds in town with all the rain, I can't say that we didn't get a little behind when the summer help went back to school and then everything started growing. So we have been in discussion, but we're in regular discussion with those folks, and I think we're in a good place.
Thank you.
That's all. And I'm sorry, that was answering your question, Chuck. That's all we've got.
That's all right.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else to come before the commission, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and doubly second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Yeah. That thing's just like,
Better go out there and ask.
30 days. I wonder what 30 days from now is.